brief Q&A. So we'll be posting this on our website where we have other drought resource grant Q&A materials, including the actual RFR. So welcome everyone, good morning. My name is Purvi Patel with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I'm the Assistant Director of Water Policy, and I'm joined by staff from the Office of Water Resources at DCR, Jason Duff, Aaron Graham, and Ann Carroll, who we're so fortunate to have here, will be able to address any questions at the end regarding this drought resiliency and water efficiency grant program. So Jason, if you'd like to share the slide deck.
Can you see it for me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So this session is meant to answer some of the questions that you might have. We'll go through this pretty brief slide deck, about 10 slides. Jason and I will both be presenting. And what we'll say generally is that some of the questions we're able to address, and some of the questions maybe questions that we're not able to address because they may have conflicts with how we review the actual applications once they come in. So hopefully you'll get a good sense of what the program entails. And there's also going to be a Q&A that's posted, and it'll be dynamic so that it'll be able to be updated as these questions come in. Okay. So this is for the Drought Resiliency and Water Efficiency Grant Program. We've gotten a lot of excitement about it, and we're really happy that people are encouraged. The grant, the RFR was posted in December, and the deadline for applications is January 31st. So that's in about 3 weeks and the end of January. The applications are meant to be concise and sort of limit the burden on the applicants. And so, please have a look at what the RFR states, and really think about how you might be succinct and how you're presenting these. We do want this to be a huge lift for you. The applications to be sent to me at my address here, purvi.patel@mass.gov. Probably one of the only Purvi Patels at mass.gov, so you'll be able to find me pretty easily. Next slide, please, Jason. And as many of you know, we're in a current drought already. And so when we see increasing droughts in Massachusetts and across the nation, so this, we feel like this grant program is very timely. And it's a way to help applicants, you all, find some funding for some of the projects that you've been thinking about. And the goal is to support the projects that you have in mind that reduce water use, promote climate resiliency, and ensure that water can be effectively used for all the different uses out there, but for our use and maintaining ecosystem health. The areas that are
pretty good. It's 11 in the.
Thank you. So the focus areas include indoor and outdoor water use reduction, water loss control programs, and drought management and planning for those. We'll get into a little bit more detail as the slide deck proceeds. Thanks, Jason. Next slide. We wanted to open this up to a wide variety of applicants, so municipalities, public water suppliers, nonprofit organizations, schools, colleges, universities, and RPAs, so regional planning agencies. And if you have considered collaborating with an adjacent municipality or public water supplier or any sort of cross collaboration, this would be a really good project for you maybe to have that discussion and think about how that might be best coordinated. Okay, next slide. So some of the examples that are listed in more detail in the actual request for response include water loss control, development implementation of water loss control programs, leak detection, and meter calibration as examples. improving water efficiency and conservation, so development of water conservation plans and other leak detection activities or incentive programs. Providing efficiency for outdoor water use, such as landscape transformation plans and irrigation system audits and upgrades, and drought management planning. So for local, maybe you're considering a local drought plan or water use restrictions, bylaws, that sort of area. Next slide. We have a total funding amount of about $500,000, and the award is for $50,000, and that'll be dependent on the number of applications we get and what sort of requests are made for the funding. Again, wanted to reiterate that the application deadline, or the application deadline, as I mentioned, is January 31st. The work has to be for your project has to be completed. Actually, I'm going to step back. The grant is only able to provide funding for work up to June 30th. So your project can span months beyond that. It can, even be a year project, but we're only able to offer that funding for work that you can demonstrate has been completed by June 30th. Jason, I think you're going to continue from here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Porvi. And I noticed people are putting some questions in the chat, so feel free to keep doing that, and we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. But just to continue this, so looking at the estimated program timeline, we have to say estimated because things might change depending on a variety of factors, but we're pretty confident that this is the timeline that we'll be able to stick to. So right now, we've gotten really up to here, January 8th. This is the last informational session that we're going to have for this program. And then, continuing on from there, some important deadlines, the submission of proposals or applications. They are due by January 31st. And as we said, you can send those directly to Porvi at her email address. And so, yeah, send them through there. Information for the program is on Combis, and we have a promotional page as well, and we'll have links to both of those on one of the upcoming slides. But yeah, so important deadline there for getting the proposal submitted. The next important deadline here is, we hope to be able to notify the successful applicant here towards the end of February, which would allow us to start contracts, hopefully, again, hopefully around February 25th through March 4th. And then really, really important deadline there of June 30th for, as Porvi mentioned, completion of project work, really completion of the funded portion of projects under this program. So again, I think Porvi mentioned it earlier, but we are encouraging regional scope projects and that idea of collaboration among multiple either municipalities or organization types. And then also innovative solutions too are always encouraged because we know that there's a lot of the world of drought management and water efficiency is really a constantly evolving field, and so there's a lot of new and innovative things going on out there. So we like to see that too. As far as some logistics, so again, we are now accepting applications. So whenever those are ready, you can send them over to Porvi. As I mentioned before, details about the program are posted on Combis, so you can see them there. We also have a promotional page that we created for this grant program, and the link is here. It's also, you can navigate to it through our mass.gov website as well. So it's just posted right there. A lot of good information there, including the already submitted questions and answers that we've received from our previous Q&A session. And we've been receiving some questions both through Combis and by email. So we've been trying to compile those, and we'll be posting an updated version of that here in the near future. So that'll be a good resource. And then contact info. So Corby, the main contact, but I can also help to answer questions. And that's really it as far as logistics that we have. Again, I urge you to look at the full RFR because it's pretty detailed in terms of the evaluation criteria and you know what expected with the proposals. So definitely refer to that, and you know of course always feel free to reach out with questions. But with that, unless there's anything that Porvi or Ann or Aaron want to add, I think we can start answering any other questions.
That sounds great, Jason. We do have a number of questions, and really wanted to underline what Jason had just said, in the sense that we have a running and compiled list of questions that we've already received through combis and through emails, and we're trying to provide responses, and they may be updated as we get more clarity, or questions become more comprehensive. So please consider, you know, reviewing that document intermittently to make sure that, you know, your question has been addressed. So the first question, and please feel free to unmute and ask your question. So Hannah Davis has a question. Hannah, if you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to, or I can read your question out.
Hi, this is Hannah Davis. Yeah, either is fine by me. We're curious about whether or not, sorry, one moment. Yeah, so we're curious about whether or not professional services contract to lease leak monitoring equipment would be an allowable cost. Looking forward to your input on that.
And Jason, do you want to provide the response that we have to that question based on another similar one?
Yeah, so we actually have received that. So I did compile I think all of the questions we've received so far, and that is one of them that's on here. So the purchase of devices and equipment in general. So yeah, that is listed right in the RFR as an allowable cost. And then I believe it was specifically asked, and I don't know if this was a separate question or if this was just asked too, but the idea of leasing leak detection equipment, which we did get confirmation that leasing of equipment, as long as the project fits within the scope that's outlined, you know, in the RFR, that is an allowable cost. Also with the note that we are only able to reimburse those costs that are incurred during the contract period. So, you know, with like depending on how long a lease period is, you know, we would not be able to reimburse for lease payments that are before or after that contract period. So that timeline is just a really important component to figuring out what would be eligible for reimbursement.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And so Paul Anderson had the question of the purchase of leak detection equipment. And I hope that's been addressed now. Paul, go ahead, and it looks like you have a follow-up.
No, that's great. Thank you. It's, you know, purchasing the equipment allows systems to monitor on a regular basis instead of contracting out annually. So that would be very helpful. I was curious about correspondence, like with residents, whether or not you could apply for funds, you know, to create the communication with the residents, whether it's signage or notifications to the residents about conservation. Would that be considered?
That is a great question, and I don't know how to answer that. So perhaps someone on this team will definitely take your question, Paul. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm gonna make a note, but if you could like write your question in the chat, which we'll save.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, and we will follow up directly. We're able to follow up directly, and then we'll have this question be up on the Q&A document that's already uploaded on our Drought
Okay.
grant page? That's a great question, Paul. And I'm sorry, Anne, Aaron, Jason, do you have a sense of that would be an eligible activity that you would be comfortable stating at this point?
I'm going to defer to Anne and Aaron. I apologize. I was answering an internal chat question and missed a good chunk of the question.
Let me just maybe ask, I think just on the face of it, it sounds like it does generally broadly fit within the scope. But if you could say a little bit more, like, would it be software that would help you communicate, or would it be services? I would certainly be open to it. I mean, you may have sense that for all of us, this is our first grant program, administration wise. So that's why we're sort of saying, in some cases we need to check regarding the, kind of larger constraints at EEA for this funding. I think it sounds reasonable, but I don't know. Yeah, so if you put the question in, if you put the details in, then we could kind of certainly provide a more what am I trying to say? A certainty around our response in a written response.
Sure. I'll have to collect my thoughts on it a little bit and be a little more specific. But one of the challenges municipalities have is getting the information out to the public in a way that, they can comprehend it. And with the water conservation measures that we constantly are juggling, especially if you can do it on a regional basis, so there's some consistency with what the public is seeing as they're driving from one town to the next town. Otherwise, you lose credibility with the public. And when you start to implement restrictions or talk about conservation, they're no longer listening to you because they don't see regional consistency. So I guess that's kind of, what I was thinking. It might be kind of hard to pull off within the time span, but it also might be, and it could be, multi-towns working together. But
in general,
I'll follow up with an email.
Thank you.
Being a little more clear on it.
And in general, we really support and appreciate multiple towns working together, and absolutely hear the challenges that you're saying and agree, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, absolutely. So as you reframe your thought or think about it, please, you can email myself or Jason, and we'll have that question be populated with the response. Okay, so Fiona Jevon, and I'm so sorry for any mispronunciations of names. If you'd like to unmute and share your question.
Sure, hi, and you got my name perfect. I'm from Milton, and I was just wondering, with sort of the caveat that, of course, I know these things are uncertain, do you expect that this opportunity might be recurring at all, or do you think that this is a one-time opportunity?
We would certainly like it to be recurring. So that's our hope and our, intention, but we don't have any understanding that this will be recurring. Like, there's no commitment for that funding to be annual.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question, Fiona. So I'll just go back and forth between whoever has their hand raised and the question. So Suzanne Wood, if you'd like to unmute.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Wood with UMass Chan Medical School in Worcester. Our campus is looking at doing a comprehensive kind of water and supply resiliency study, looking at strategies ranging from district scale water reclamation and reuse to aquifer recharge to wells to gray water system is kind of a comprehensive planning thing, similar to how you do decarb studies. Would this be something that would be eligible under this grant?
I'm going to defer your question. Thank you, Suzanne.
Yes, I think from what you described, I think it does fit into the scope, kind of under that drought management and resiliency, and drought and water efficiency planning component. So it definitely sounds like it would fit fit within the scope of the program. And
Great.
I don't know, Ann or Aaron, if you agree.
I
I'm
agree.
assuming. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. David Tapscott. Also, if you don't care to unmute, I'll just share your question. I just wanted to afford you the opportunity. So I don't hear you unmuting, so I will just read your question. Do you have the capacity to work with an applicant to refine or develop ideas about xeriscaping irrigation wells and perhaps Board of Health regulations governing landscape irrigation using municipal and or private wells? And I will also defer that question to you.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting question. This might be one that we will want to prepare a better response for, but in general, like we can't work with applicants on preparing an application or a proposal for any topic. So that's one limitation. And then in terms of whether or not this idea of I mean certainly xeriscaping, so like drought resilient landscaping, and any projects related to that is within the scope of the program. The second part of that about irrigation using municipal and or private wells, I think it very much would depend on the specific project there. And so we would probably just need more information and to be able to provide a more adequate response on whether or not that part of it would fit under the current scope.
Thanks, Jason. Ann or Aaron, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree.
And thank you for your question, David. So we will provide, again, list your question on the Q&A document and provide whatever response we're able to respond.
Yeah, I finally got myself unmuted.
Oh,
Thank you for answering the question. It would be like a pilot program because I don't know of anyone else in the state that's addressed this problem. I've worked with Mass Rivers and other people to try and figure out. We had an Amazon come to town and they put in 4 irrigation wells, even though they're in municipal water. And MIPA recommended they do xeriscaping, and they ignored that. So it's infuriating the amount of water that's being used for landscaping, and it draws upon the aquifer that the municipal supply and private wells both draw on. And it's basically to study that and develop, I think, local Board of Health regulations which might apply to that. So it'd be like a pilot kind of a thing. It wouldn't be regional, but it could be replicated.
Yeah, in that case, given that description, I think that would fall within the scope.
So
yeah, Ann, go ahead.
question, yeah. So I mean, I just want to clarify. So there is authority. Towns through boards of health do have authority to regulate private wells.
Correct. Yeah, I'm on the Board of Health. Yeah, so
So that authority exists. You just have to, not that it's easy sometimes, but some towns have done that.
Uh-huh.
So
yeah, it would be a question of monitoring the amount of water used for irrigation and developing regulations around that. Sort of looking in general at the impact of irrigation, private and public, using public water for irrigation, and people drilling wells in their backyard to irrigate their lawns, even though they're on municipal water, so they don't have to pay for the water. There's all kinds of permutations to this, but that's sort of just an idea, I guess. And I'd have to narrow it down, of course.
Well, so that sounds like below threshold withdrawal kind of study, right? Maybe below Water Management Act threshold withdrawals. Looking. I mean, there's some of those exist if you're affiliated with Mass River, you probably already know that, that some folks have looked into that in the Ipswich watershed.
Yeah.
But, maybe that's what you're thinking about.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. All right. Well, I'll contact them also. Okay.
yeah, I
I
would
wasn't aware of
recommend,
that.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
sure.
Thanks, David. A great question. Sam Corda. Hi, Sam. Just give you a second to unmute and share your question.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. My question was that if indeed we're going to update our drought management plan, and if indeed it was funded through DEP, the question would be is if the portion that's funded is done by the 30th, but we won't be able to get their final report done until, let's say, July or August or whatever, is that an acceptable process to do to still obtain the grant funding?
That's a really good question. And so first of all, I guess to clarify, this grant program is not through DEP. DEP has their separate Water Management Act grant program that is similar scope. There's a little bit of overlap, but this is a new program, just through EEA.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. And then as far as the reporting goes, this is another one we may need to have some internal conversations on, and look back at how it's listed in the RFR. I believe we have the ability to be somewhat flexible on the submission of that final report. But it looks like Anne has her hand raised, so she might have some additional insight. So go ahead, Anne.
Well, another clarifying question for you, but assuming you were saying, you scope the full project and then you have specific tasks to complete that. And say, for example, one of them is like establishing triggers for your, water supply or stages for your drought. That would be a discrete task if you got that done. And that's what you asked for the funding for. I think if the entire plan weren't done, I would think that would meet the spirit of what we were saying here. As long as you're just very clear about, this is the work that we're paying for and that's been completed by June 30th.
Yeah, I think that would be I'm just going to use this as an example. Say we have 6 tasks and the first 4 were requesting funding and it was approved, whatever that number is, doesn't really matter. But we weren't able to, because there's more tasks, we needed to finish them before we could do the final report. That's the reason for the question, because we know it's going to take a little bit longer than June 30th to finish the entire update, because that's what we would be suggesting, updating our drought management plan. And as long as that would be okay, that's just want to make sure that we could submit the final report subsequent to June 30th, as long as the work that we wanted to get completed or was approved was completed by June 30th. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I think it sounds reasonable.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I would agree. Yeah, as long as the work that is being reimbursed and the cost of that has been incurred during the contract period. I think that's an important piece. But yeah, and Porvy, did you want to?
I was just going to say, and proof that the work is completed. Usually,
Right.
the final report might be that proof, but we'd have to have some kind of documentation.
Okay.
If we're not getting the final report.
Would like invoices or for tasks completed, would that be sufficient to verify that the work was completed? Because we're going to hire a consultant to upgrade our drought management plan. So I'm just trying to see what might be valid to verify that.
That's a good question. Probably, maybe you in your proposal you could try to specify how you would provide documentation.
Okay. I think that's another option as well. Sure.
And Sam, you could identify your intention and then maybe the limitations based on, constraints of time. And we can certainly present this. We have grant experts that we would want to run some of these questions by to just get, a sense like what our preference is and not necessarily sometimes what we're allowed to. And as Anne, stated, this is our first grant program, so we're still navigating that. And thanks to Jason for clarifying that this grant does come from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I am sorry, I was understanding that you were doing something with like a duality between DEP and maybe there was some sort of requirement with DEP. So Jason,
No.
thanks for that clarification.
I actually misspoke because I didn't actually know it was part of EA, the proposal, the RFP or whatever was that. So I did misspeak on that. Definitely not doing anything duality with anybody.
Okay, great. Great. Thanks, Sam. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Same here.
Alice Bojanowski. And I'm sorry again, Alice. If you'd like to unmute.
Hello, my name is Alice. I am a retired urban planner, and I know that there's a lot of information available to spread this information to the public on how to reduce water usage and also really look at why we have droughts and how much water each individual is using. So I had worked with the South Florida Water Management District before moving to Massachusetts. They've got great info. I haven't used the Massachusetts info yet, but I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks for that really helpful information, Alice. I appreciate it. We'll also be looking at it at the resource you provided. Okay, wonderful. And Kristen, you responded that our local mass watershed associations have great outreach materials. Awesome. Nice collaboration already. I don't see any more questions, and I did
Corby,
see
it looks like
hands raised.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah,
I
Will.
thought I had seen Suzanne. I thought you had your hand up, and I was going to call on you again, but perhaps you
Will
lowered your hand.
Jan has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Anne.
Hi, thank you. My name is Will Yan with Apex Companies. I have a question regarding the grant program. I see in the RFQ that the EEA seeks to prioritize EJ communities, and I was wondering if you can speak a little bit on what percentage of the evaluation component is attributed to the EJ communities.
Thanks for that question, Will. We have a ranking score sheet that we'll be applying, and I think that the point system was also provided in the RFR. So there'll be, I don't have it readily available, but there will be some specific points attributed to, and I'm sorry, if somebody else wants to chime in at this point. So I think the state and the state is focused on making sure that EJ communities are involved in the planning and in benefits that are associated with certain projects. So how we look at that will be determined by the score sheet that we have and sort of the relationship of your project with how those communities are benefited or are assisted through the project that you're proposing. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to just review our RFR to understand better if we've identified that.
Yeah, Corby,
Jason,
just to jump in, yeah. So we didn't designate in the RFR any specific percent or point breakdown. We, as stated in the RFR, it's just kind of the standard EEA language that preference will be given to projects that provide direct benefit to EJ populations. So it is a consideration. But right now there's no specific percentage of the criteria that evaluation criteria that is, corresponding to that.
Thanks,
So,
Jason, for that
yeah.
clarification.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Okay. And thanks for your question, Will.
Of course. May I ask a
Oh,
follow-up
Yeah,
question?
of course, please.
It's related to some of the required forms. I see that there is a list of required forms that's required to execute the contract if awarded. I'm wondering, a lot of municipalities don't have the manpower needed to populate these forms, and they have to procure engineering services to help develop these forms. But since these forms are required prior to the contract execution date, is it safe to assume that any time spent developing these forms do not qualify for reimbursement?
That's a really good question. And one that we have not received yet. I think we're going to have to check with our our contacts that are more directly involved in the procurement and all of that at EEA, unless Anne or Orvi have any idea. Because I know those forms are not required for application, but they are required prior to, as you mentioned, it required in order to execute the contract. So, yeah, I think that's something we're gonna have to follow up with.
And Will, if you wouldn't mind, again, typing out your question, or at least emailing, if you after some time, if you want to think about it, emailing me and Jason. That way we know exactly what you're asking and can provide a better response. Yeah. Anne or Aaron, do you have anything you want to add?
I was just going to say, so it sounds like this would be the time period after award notification, but before contract. So what I'm wondering is, I know we had asked the grant specialist if funding could be awarded for work that was done before, like before the grant, as part of a project that might have already gotten started. And we were told no about that. But this seems like it's a little bit different. And I wonder if it were written right into the proposal, whether we could consider it, like ahead of time. But I don't know. So we will have to check on that. But if you could kind of write out that question, we can try to get a better answer.
Okay, yeah, more than happy to write that question to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will.
And Suzanne, I'm glad that I did think I saw your hand up. I'm glad that your question was answered by that previous question. Okay. Great.
It looks like there's one more for a real quick question in the chat.
Oh, I missed it.
And actually it was a direct to me. So, but it's just will the PowerPoint be available following this meeting? And yes, we will post this PowerPoint along with that eventual, once we update it, the Q&A document with all the questions that have been asked and the answers to the promotional page that we have set up through mass.gov and also on Combias. So all of it will be available.
As well as the recording for this session, which is, ongoing. So Will had put his question in. Are engineering services paid by the grant required to go through an RFQ process beyond the requirements of the mass bid laws? I think that's a different question, right? That you're asking, Will?
Yes, that's a different question from a colleague of mine. I'm not too familiar with the bidding process, but that's a question that a colleague of mine had. I was wondering if you guys can speak a little bit on that. If not, I can pose that via an email.
I mean, I do think that consulting services specifically related to the proposed project are eligible. So, and Jason's nodding his head, so maybe I'm not misspeaking.
Yeah, we do have that listed specifically as an allowable cost, consulting services and fees. Again, as long as the services fall within the scope. As far as the process, an applicant's procurement of services and whether or not they use an RFQ, that I think yeah, I think maybe a more detailed question submitted, and we can just make sure we get that answered adequately as a follow-up. My initial thought is no, that we wouldn't have any say in the internal procurement process for consulting services or any other services that an applicant is going through on their end once an award is made. So.
Right. I think that's correct, Jason.
Yeah.
That as a line item, any expenses from a consultant would be maybe would be eligible, but that process of going through the separate RFQ, we would not be involved in that. That would be for you to undertake separately. But again, we will follow up. And thank you again, Will. You'll provide that initial question, I'm sure, later on. Okay. Todd Everson, if you'd like to unmute.
Just wondering. Just looking for a link to the RFR. I haven't seen it.
Okay, great. We'll make sure we'll actually put it in the chat. Thank you, Jason.
I did just put it in the chat. Sorry about that.
I didn't read your question before I asked you to unmute, but that's great. So Jason's put that there. It's not the easiest to search for, but our Drought resource page is very easy to find on the EEA website. So that does have a link to all of the different resources that we have. And Glenn Eaton, you've provided a link to resource from the Mass Municipal Association webpage I'm just trying to read what the link says. Manual procuring supplies, services, and real property. Glenn, do you want to unmute and maybe share why you shared this really helpful document?
Yeah, sure. No problem. The bottom line is, after 38 years in government, I've never seen a manual so illustrative and helpful to public officials in the questions of procurement. And I'm sorry, but I live inside the procurement manual a lot, and the reality is that the answers are in there. So I'm not going to pontificate about the answer to the question, but I've yet to see a state or federal government funded program where you don't have to go out to some sort of competitive process, whether it's quoting, general business practices, or quoting or bidding. So the answers are in there, that if you just link it, go to the table of contents, figure out the dollar figure. The table of contents is laid out by the dollar of the amount of services in the number of dollars. So if you have a $25,000 something, just go to the table of contents where it says 10,000 to 49.99, and it'll answer all your questions. I just wanted to provide it as a resource and not even speak, but thank you. Hopefully it helps people. And that's all I'm trying to do, is be helpful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Glenn. That is very appreciated. Great. I'm definitely going to invest some time looking at that as a novice grant program manager. Okay, and then Jason has also provided a link to the mass.gov site where the information is living for this grant program. So if folks can just make sure that they have raised their hands if they still have any questions, or if I apologize if I've missed any questions in the chat. We still have some time here. And this isn't the only opportunity. Jason showed the timeline, which identifies that next Wednesday, the 15th, will be the final opportunity for you to submit questions that we can address in this more public fashion on the Q&A doc and through Combis. So, please take your time to think about some questions that you might have regarding the grant program. And if you have those questions, you can certainly reach out to me or Jason, and we'll do our best to provide we'll provide a response, and hopefully it'll be helpful. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. Is anyone else seeing that lack?
No, I don't see anything else.
So thank you so much, everyone. We're really, really excited about this. We do hope to get a good number of applications in, and we're going to be doing our best to review those as quickly as possible. Again, the timeline is also part of the RFR, so you can see what our schedule is for that. Yes, I agree, Alice. That was great advice from Glenn. And so you'll be able to see what our timeline is for the review process, and then internal approval again, and then the contract award. Okay, so please check back in with us and with our website, and we'll look forward to reviewing these applications. You are very welcome, Chris. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending. Have a great day.